thinking better and thinking together about life's most important issues. A place to finally meet in the middle, to think freely and reasonably about the big questions of life. This is Thinker Sensitive. Welcome to Thinker Sensitive. My name is Ryan Ragazine, and I am honored to be your host. I've been talking a lot lately about Christian ethics. In recent weeks, we've seen that in Christianity, the moral life is understood as the good life. The lawful life is understood as the blessed life. We've also seen that in the Christian faith, all laws, all ethical precepts, all moral commandments are fulfilled in the freedom and simplicity of love. Today, I want to move into the area of classical Greek ethics, which in a lot of ways share a close relationship with and even anticipate Christian ethics. So much so that some of the patristics and early Christian theologians and philosophers actually viewed prominent figures of Greek philosophy as historical forerunners or precursors to Christ, the Logos made flesh. Using what can be referred to as a part-whole schema, Christian thinkers like Justin Martyr and Clement of Alexandria believed that the Logos, in some mystical and mysterious sense, was partially present and active in figures like Plato, and thus that Greek philosophy served as an intellectual and ethical forebearer to the gospel, preparing the way for the ministry of Jesus Christ. Not totally unlike John the Baptist. Early Christian philosophers and theologians were not wrong. Scripture itself attests to this reality. Christ, the fulfillment of the law, love incarnate, the Logos made flesh, is ever present and active in human history through the omnipresence of life-giving spirit in the world. Almost every time the Old Testament writers speak of the Spirit, they speak of the Spirit as the giver of life, the one who breathes life into beings, the one who animates living things. The Apostle Paul says something very similar when speaking to a group of Greek thinkers in the city of Athens, interestingly enough. In Acts 17:28, he says, quote, "For in him, that is God, the Spirit of life, we live and move and have our being." End quote. The spirit of life and animation is also the spirit of creativity, the one who inspires creative action and artistic expression in human beings. In Exodus 31:2-6, as the Israelites were getting ready to build a tabernacle, Yahweh tells Moses, quote, "See, I have chosen Bezalel, son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, with understanding, with knowledge, and with all kinds of skills, to make artistic designs for working gold, silver, and bronze, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, and to engage in all kinds of crafts. Moreover, I have appointed Oholiab, son of Ahisamach of the tribe of Dan, to help him. Also, I have given ability to all the skilled workers to make everything I have commanded you." End quote. Not only do we see here that the Spirit is the source of creativity, inspiration, artistry, and all kinds of skills and abilities, but we also see that the Spirit is the source of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. This is what Justin Martyr, Clement of Alexandria, and other early Christians were getting at. The Spirit of God is the source and goal of gnosis, of knowledge. This involves moral and ethical knowledge, even if only partial, even if incomplete and somewhat limited, even if mixed with error and misunderstanding, as almost all human knowledge is prone to be. Paul has something like this in mind when he states in Romans 2:14 through 15, quote, "For when Gentiles, who do not have the law, by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the work of the law is written on their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them." End quote. Where does this law written on the hearts of humankind come from? Where do you think the human conscience comes from? Do these things not come from the spirit of life, the spirit of creativity and inspiration, the spirit of knowledge and understanding, even the Spirit of Christ Himself? If this is indeed the case, if the Spirit of Christ, the Logos made flesh, is indeed ever present and active in human history through the omnipresence of the Spirit in the cosmos, then we shouldn't be surprised to find a great deal of truth and wisdom and knowledge, including moral and ethical knowledge, in extra biblical and non Christian sources, even in other religions. Last time I checked, the Magi from the East, the wise men who visited the baby Jesus, offering him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, were not of the Judeo Christian tradition. Yet they were full of wisdom, inspired and moved by the Spirit of God. With this in mind, let's hear, with open minds and soft hearts, what classical Greek philosophy has to teach us about morality and ethics. Today's podcast will represent a Christian appropriation of Greek ethics, using some of the unique insights of Christianity to fill in some of the gaps and strengthen some of the weaknesses of classical moral thought. This week's podcast will focus singularly on Epicureanism, with special attention given to its founder, Epicurus. I have a real problem with discipline when it comes to food. I am a food lover. A foodie, if you will. To me, food is one of the great pleasures of life. Sometimes I wish I didn't love food so much. The thing about me is that I like it all. I like food that is savory and food that is sweet. I definitely have an amplified sweet tooth, which can be a real problem for me. I have a very difficult time eating junk food in moderation. I can't have just one chip or one cookie. I need all the chips and all the cookies. This is why I find it much easier to completely remove those things from my diet than to simply cut down on them or ease off of them. If junk food is in the house, I will find it and I will eat it. My belly and my insatiable hunger will prevail. and will claim victory over that bag of chips that my wife foolishly left unprotected on the kitchen counter. Suffice it to say, I have not even come close to mastering the art of moderation when it comes to food. For me, it's either excess or nothing at all. In comes Epicurus to save the day. Epicurus was born on the island of Samoa. He visited Athens as a teenager and briefly studied under a disciple of Plato. Years later, he would return to Athens, but this time not as a student, but rather as a teacher, quickly establishing a philosophy school at a local garden. He liked it so much that he never left. Epicurus could be described as a henotheist and a deist, possibly believing in various sub-gods or even semi-gods or demigods, while affirming the existence of a singular supreme being who does not intervene in human affairs. But please take what I'm saying about Epicurus's theology with a grain of salt, since I'm drawing subjective interpretive conclusions from a single source, mainly Epicurus's letter to Menicius. Here is a quick excerpt. I'm using Cyril Bailey's standard translation. Quote, "The things which I used unceasingly to commend to you, these do in practice, considering them to be the first principles of the good life. First of all, believe that God is a being immortal and blessed, even as the common idea of a God is engraved on men's minds. And do not assign to him anything alien to his immortality or ill-suited to his blessedness, but believe about him everything that can uphold his blessedness and immortality." End quote. Here we find the idea that God is eternally blessed or happy, and that this eternally happy God is the source of, or at least is directly related to, the good life. Presumably in the same way that universals in the metaphysical realm are connected to or are the sources of all individuals or particulars in the physical realm. Similar ideas are found in Christian theology, most notably in the theology of St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, who helped to further connect some of these dots. As intimated in the previous quote, Epicurus, like many other classical Greek philosophers, was preoccupied with the pursuit of contentment or happiness. The original Greek word here is eudaimonia. One might translate eudaimonia as fulfillment. Epicurus viewed pleasure as the primary means to personal fulfillment, although he also understood pleasure as an end in itself, as well as the subjective standard by which we judge something good, which is why Epicureanism can be described as a form of hedonism, a classical form. Epicurean hedonism, however, is quite different from modern hedonism, stressing the importance of regulating desires, limiting and minimizing needs, mindfully directing our lives towards fulfillment, contentment, and peace of mind, and the way of moderation over excess. When Epicurus describes the pursuit of pleasure, he's not talking about things like indulgences, vanities, luxuries, ease, and instant gratification. But instead, he's referring to things like physical well-being, mental repose, freedom from addiction, joy, self-sufficiency, wisdom, sobriety, and simplicity. I want to discuss the classical concept of simplicity for a moment. For the ancients, being simple was quite different than being basic in current times. Philosophical simplicity had nothing to do with ordering a pumpkin spice latte at Starbucks. Classical simplicity involves perfect unity, harmony, and agreement between all of the major aspects of a person's being: heart, mind, and will. And it entails the ordering and directing of all of these dimensions of the human person towards the same goal, end, and telos. Moses had something similar in mind when he told the people of Israel to, quote, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, end quote. In classical thought, the simple person is contrasted by the complex person. The classical notion of complexity isn't all that dissimilar to the concepts of double-mindedness and double-heartedness. To use biblical language, the complex person is unstable in all of his ways, tossed around by the waves and carried about by every wind. Consumed by passion, dominated by wanton lust and unregulated desire, the complex person wants everything all at once, most notably everything that he doesn't currently have. This complexity breeds anxiety, stress, and discontentment, the same kind of pain and discomfort that Epicurus is attempting to avoid in his simple and singular pursuit of pleasure. To help illustrate the pain of complexity, imagine that you are a very indecisive person, and thus that you struggle to make decisions. Moreover, imagine that you currently find yourself in a situation where you are forced to choose just one option out of a myriad of different options. Such a scenario would probably really stress you out. This is the situation of the complex person. It is a situation, a condition of constant distress and discomfort. The simple person has transcended this condition, for she knows what she wants, and she wants but one thing. When she attains that one thing, she treasures it with all of her heart, finding great satisfaction and contentment in it. This simple person, this beautiful soul, knows happiness and fulfillment and peace in a way that the complex person never will. Though Epicurus was preoccupied with pleasure and happiness, he believed that prudence was ultimately the greatest good, the virtue of all virtues. In his letter to Menicius, Epicurus writes, quote, the origin and greatest good of all these things is prudence. Hence, prudence is more prized than philosophy. For from it springs all the rest of the virtues. And prudence teaches us that it is not possible to live pleasantly without living prudently, finely, and justly, nor to live prudently, finely, and justly without pleasure. For the virtues are by nature bound up with living pleasantly. It is inseparable from them. End quote. Here we find the idea of the moral life as the good life, the virtuous life as the blessed life, the just life as the pleasant life. In conclusion, the Christian faith supports and assists Epicureanism rather well. It does this in 3 ways. First, it provides needed help. As the helper, the Spirit of God bestows both strength and mercy to the weary disciple of Epicurus. For instance, the Spirit can impart the power of discipline when it comes to food, enabling us to enjoy the pleasure of eating while also enjoying the pleasure of physical wellness as we avoid the extremes of excess on one hand and deprivation on the other. Second, it provides us with the greatest living example of moderation, Jesus Christ Himself, the ultimate moral and ethical exemplar. Third, it gives us the right and proper motivation, the most pure impetus of all, love. Love of the good, love of God, the source and goal of all peace, contentment, fulfillment, pleasure, and happiness.